Hello. Um, I recently got to attend a very interesting conference where we got to exchange a lot of ideas, um, talk about a lot of entrepreneurial and business ventures, and it gave me a little bit of time to reflect on the negotiation training that I'm currently doing for um, for the Moonlight Bunny Ranch. And one of the focuses of that training has been rapport building. And so I wanted to take a little bit of time to just share a little bit of my experience with rapport building for building brand value, customer value. Um, just wanted to talk to you guys about brand value and how rapport plays a role in the perceived value of your good or service. Um, have you ever given thought to how your experience in a store contributes to the prices you're willing to spend? Have you ever considered how the experience that a person has in a negotiation might also affect the client's behavior during the transaction? We tend to spend more in stores when we're greeted properly, when we're helped hands-on with merchandise, and we have our questions answered by someone we trust. But we also tend to spend more when we're helped by people that we consider to be in our own peer group. Peer groups are important because they greatly influence spending and negotiating behaviors. To understand this phenomenon, we need to spend a little bit of time discussing mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are specialized kinds of neurons in the brain that fire when we see another person from our peer group experience something. So when researchers measured brain activity in bonobos, one of our closest relatives, they noticed that when one bonobo would eat a piece of fruit, the same region of the brain would light up in other bonobos observing the behavior as if they had eaten the fruit themselves. Mirror neurons are literally the biomechanism of empathy, what allows us to see the emotional states and actions of others and feel them ourselves. So peer groups are incredibly important in negotiation and sales because those in them are much easier to influence with mirroring. The more like themselves you appear to be, the more they will trust and be more favorably inclined when they're reacting to what you have to say. Consider the following scenario. Let's say I'm a jeweler in an engagement ring section. A guest sits down, starts looking at rings in the case. If I went over to the guest and I started asking them about their impending purchase, what kinds of things are important to them in buying a ring, and then started explaining industry specifics to them, they might have a good experience in my store. But consider what happens if I sit down with the guest. Notice that they're wearing a jacket that supports a local football team, and then talk to them about the last game they played and how unfair the calls were. Then I sit and talk to the client for another 5 minutes about how he met his future wife and talk about new relationships and how difficult they can be, talking about my own new marriage. And during that entire process, I match his communication. So I'm, if he's a more deliberate communicator, I'm slowing down to that pace. If he's more fast paced, I'm picking up to that pace. If he uses emotionally focused language, I start, talking about how things feel. And if he uses fact-based language, then I'm gonna, go with concrete ideas, and I'll be able to do that from those open-ended questions that I talk, that they ask him. And then after we're comfortable with one another, I pull a ring out of the case and I come and sit next to him on his side of the counter. And I ask him if he wants to go through the process of picking out a design, or if he'd rather just focus on getting her the nicest stone in his budget and then let her pick her own mounting later on when it's paid off. And I'll mention like one of the most difficult things about the engagement ring process is that women can be very fickle and sometimes even like designs that are very visually similar to their dream ring and like not like those. So I even will explain maybe that I had that problem with in my own relationship. So of those two, who's now having a better experience and who's going to spend more money? Building rapport during negotiations is crucial because it gives you imaginary credibility. The more like themselves you appear to be, the more implicitly they will trust what you have to say because it comes from a source like them. This is one of the reasons it can be so important to learn the languages that people speak in your market. An interpreter may be able to get your message across, but they will serve as a barrier to mirror neurons because the guest won't be interacting with you directly. Teleconferencing is equally bad for a first meeting because generally it doesn't allow participants to see one another's body language. Be mindful that that effect will have, that effect is going to be present when you're trying to choose who will negotiate too. depending on the client's age, gender, race, or perceived experience. Um, all of those can be factors in picking the right person to negotiate with them. You have to try and assign a negotiator that will respond to their subconscious peer group whenever possible. Um, Body language is a key part of engaging mirror neurons. Our bodies literally visually experience our emotions. Fear, hesitation, anxiety, happiness, they're all clearly evident in a person's physical disposition. The key is learning to only mirror positive emotions, and that requires a knowledge of what different body postures mean. And I can't get into that in this video just because there's just so much. There's only so much material I can give you in a bite size. But um, if your client's cold, and let's say crosses their arms because they're cold, and then you decide to mirror and you cross your arms in an attempt to mirror, you won't understand that your body posture usually indicates like closed communication and dispute. You could escalate a confrontation or even convince the person you're talking to you'd rather be somewhere else or have nothing in common. So body language is super important. So mirroring in negotiation has three basic steps. You're going to observe, mirror, and then you're going to guide the participants. So observe what's their pace and focus. Are you communicating at the same speed and using the same kind of language that they are? Do they look comfortable? What positive or negative body postures do you observe? And then mirror. You start communicating with the same pace and focus, adjust your body language to complement but not directly copy the client's, and you ignore any posturing that has negative emotional implications. So you want to mirror selectively, only mirroring positive body language. And then guide. Start changing 1 to 2 things about your body posture in a positive way. Make your body language more open, more thoughtful. You can use like a cognition gesture, like this is one of the ones when you're listening to someone and you're considering what they have to say. You can use a cognition gesture to convey interest and thought. If you've invested the appropriate amount of time into rapport building, something really interesting will happen. You'll see your subject change their body posture in response to what you're doing. And that means that you're in sync and you can move on to the sale or the presentation or move things on to the next step. If you try repeatedly to do small things different than their body posture and they won't respond, they're not seeing you as part of their peer group. And if you have the option, it might be possible that you need to turn over. Because if you turn over to another negotiator and you have someone else on your negotiation team who might fit a little better into that peer group, they're probably going to be able to sell them for a lot more than you are. If let's say I have someone, and we'll use the jewelry store example again, and someone comes in and they're military. Well, if I get someone who's in that same age category and has been in the military before, and I have a sales associate like that, I should always be trying to put that person into the sales interaction because all other things the same, assuming that everyone's selling skills are the same, that person is going to be able to sell that individual way, way more because of them being in their peer group. So it's better to introduce someone to another person before the sales presentation begins and give them a proper chance to build rapport than it is to try to force your way through a sale with the wrong person. And you don't always have that choice. Sometimes you're the only negotiator, but it's really important to be aware of that effect. So today I've talked a little bit about building rapport, why it can be a crucial part of negotiations. We've talked about mirror neurons, peer groups, getting the client to see you as a member of their peer group. We've talked about how to use mirror and pace, focus, and body language, and how you can use that to help grease the wheels for your negotiation. And all of these factors are only small parts of a successful negotiation. This is just a snippet of the 200 or so hours of sales training I have to offer on the subject, but I hope this video gets you thinking about the way that you want to interact with those you intend to persuade. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comments section or simply email me at anshar.seraphim@gmail.com. And wishing you all the best on your journey of self-development. Have a good one.